The wrought iron gates stood open like a welcoming embrace, and Penelope Walsh drove her sputtering sedan through them without a second thought, certain she'd finally found the convent that would take her in. The estate rose before her in magnificent Gothic splendor, all stone spires and stained glass windows that caught the late afternoon sun. She'd been driving for 3 days straight, fleeing a life that had crumbled to ash around her. The advertisement she'd seen online had been vague but promising, a place of sanctuary, silence, and spiritual contemplation. After losing her parents in a car accident 6 months ago, then discovering her fiancé had been embezzling from the charity she'd devoted 5 years to building, Penelope needed sanctuary more than she needed air. She parked her car in the circular drive, noting the immaculate hedges and the fountain featuring some stern-faced angel she didn't recognize from scripture. The place was far grander than she'd expected for a convent, but perhaps they catered to wealthier novices. Penelope smoothed down her simple cotton dress, grabbed her single suitcase, and walked up the marble steps. The massive wooden doors opened before she could knock. A woman stood there, impossibly beautiful, with paper-white skin and hair like spun silver that fell to her waist. She wore a black dress that seemed more suited to a royal court than a religious order, but Penelope chalked it up to European customs. The woman's eyes were an unsettling shade of crimson, though perhaps it was just the setting sun playing tricks. "I'm here about the sanctuary," Penelope said, her voice smaller than she'd intended. "I saw the posting online. I know I should have called first, but my phone died somewhere in Pennsylvania, and I really need somewhere quiet, somewhere I can pray and think and figure out what to do with my life." The woman studied her with an intensity that made Penelope's skin prickle. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. "Of course, please come in. The master will want to meet you, but he's occupied at the moment. I'll show you to a room where you can rest." "Thank you so much, sister." Penelope trailed off, waiting for a name. "Seraphine, though we don't use such titles here." She took Penelope's suitcase with inhuman ease and glided into the entrance hall. Penelope followed, too exhausted to question the opulence around her. The floors were polished marble, the walls lined with oil paintings of severe-looking people in clothing that spanned centuries. A chandelier dripping with crystals hung overhead, catching the dying light. Everything smelled of roses and something else, something copper-sweet she couldn't identify. Seraphine led her up a grand staircase and down a corridor lined with more portraits. The eyes in the paintings seemed to follow Penelope's progress. She shivered despite the warmth of the house. The room Seraphine showed her to was larger than Penelope's entire apartment had been. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in deep burgundy velvet. More paintings adorned the walls, and a writing desk sat before tall windows that overlooked manicured gardens. "This is beautiful," Penelope breathed. "But I don't need anything so grand. A simple cell would be fine." Seraphine's laugh was like wind chimes. "We believe in comfort here. Rest now. There are clothes in the wardrobe if you'd like to change. Dinner is at sunset, though I suspect you'll want to pray first. There's a chapel on the 3rd floor, east wing." Before Penelope could ask how to find it, Seraphine was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind her. Penelope sat on the edge of the bed, springs sighing beneath her. Every muscle in her body ached from the long drive. She should unpack, should explore, should find that chapel and offer thanks for this unexpected refuge. Instead, she lay back against the pillows and fell instantly asleep. She woke to darkness and the sound of voices below her window. Disoriented, Penelope stumbled to the glass and peered out. The gardens were illuminated by torches now, and figures moved through them with preternatural grace. They were all beautiful, all pale as moonlight, all dressed in clothing that seemed plucked from different eras. A woman in a Victorian gown walked beside a man in what looked like Renaissance finery. None of them seemed to speak, yet she could hear their voices in her head, a susurrus of sound that made her temples throb. Penelope stepped back from the window, her heart racing. What kind of convent was this? She found her phone, mercifully charged by an outlet beside the bed, and tried to pull up the posting she'd seen. Her hands shook as she scrolled through her browser history. When she found it, she read more carefully this time. "The sanctuary of eternal night welcomes those seeking refuge from the mortal world. Here, in contemplation and service, you may find purpose beyond the veil of ordinary existence." Mortal world. Veil of ordinary existence. "Oh no," Penelope whispered. "Oh no, no, no." This wasn't a convent. This was something else entirely. She needed to leave now. Immediately, Penelope grabbed her suitcase, threw her few belongings into it with shaking hands, and eased open her door. The corridor was dark save for sconces that flickered with actual flames. She crept toward the stairs, trying to remember the way she'd come in. "Leaving so soon?" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Penelope spun, her suitcase falling from her grip. A man stood at the end of the corridor, though she could have sworn it had been empty a moment before. He was tall, imposing, with the same ghostly pale skin and white hair as everyone else she'd seen. But where they had been beautiful, he was magnificent. His features were sharp and aristocratic, his hair falling in waves past his shoulders. He wore black clothing that managed to be both modern and timeless, tailored perfectly to his broad shoulders and lean frame. His eyes were the color of fresh blood. "I made a mistake," Penelope said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I thought this was a convent. I should go a convent." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I see, and you came here to pray?" "Yes. I needed sanctuary, but clearly this isn't, I don't. Have you prayed yet?" The question caught her off guard. "What? You came here to pray. Have you done so?" He moved closer, each step deliberate and soundless. "Seraphine mentioned we have a chapel. I believe you were told its location." Penelope's back hit the wall. "I fell asleep. I didn't." "Why does it matter?" "Because you sought sanctuary and we have provided it. The least we can do is ensure you accomplish what you came for." He was close enough now that she could see her reflection in his eyes, see the way his pupils dilated as he studied her. "I am Vladimarus Ashford. This is my estate. And you are Penelope Walsh. According to the identification Seraphine found in your bag, you went through my things? We needed to know who we were sheltering. Surely you understand." He tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle to be solved. "You've experienced loss recently. I can see it in the shadows under your eyes, the way you hold yourself, as though the world might shatter if you breathe too deeply." Tears pricked at Penelope's eyes. "That's none of your business." "Perhaps not. But you're standing in my home, seeking peace you haven't found anywhere else." Vladimarus stepped back, giving her space to breathe. "So I'll make you an offer. Stay the night. Pray in our chapel if it brings you comfort. In the morning, if you still wish to leave, I'll have someone drive you wherever you want to go." "Why would you do that?" "Because," he said softly, "I know something of loss and shadows, and because you interest me, Penelope Walsh. It's been a very long time since anyone has mistaken my home for a house of God." There was dark amusement in his tone, but also something genuine beneath it. Penelope's instincts screamed at her to run, but exhaustion and curiosity warred with fear. Where would she go if she left? She had no destination, no plan beyond finding somewhere to hide from her grief. "Just the night," she heard herself say. "Just the night," Vladimarus agreed. "Now would you like me to show you to the chapel?" Penelope nodded, not trusting her voice. She left her suitcase where it had fallen and followed him through corridors that seemed to shift and change when she wasn't looking directly at them. They climbed stairs she could have sworn weren't there before, until finally, Vladimarus pushed open an arched wooden door. The chapel took her breath away. It was smaller than the rest of the estate's grandeur suggested, intimate and lovely. Stained glass windows depicted scenes she didn't recognize, lit from behind by some unseen source. Pews of dark wood faced an altar that held no cross, no religious iconography she recognized. Instead, a single white rose bloomed in a crystal vase, perfect and eternal. "This is beautiful," Penelope whispered. "It was built by my ancestor 4 centuries ago. He had a fondness for sacred spaces, even if the sacred had no fondness for him." Vladimarus moved to light candles along the walls, and in their glow, the chapel became something almost holy. "Take as long as you need. No one will disturb you." He left her there, the door closing with a soft click. Penelope sank into the front pew, her hands clasped in her lap. She tried to pray, to find the words she'd been holding inside for months, but they wouldn't come. Instead, she wept. Great gasping sobs that echoed off the chapel walls. She cried for her parents lost too soon, for the future she'd planned that had dissolved like mist, for the faith she'd clung to that hadn't stopped any of the pain from coming. She cried until she had nothing left, until she was hollow and clean and strangely peaceful. When she finally left the chapel, hours had passed. The house was silent now, the torches in the gardens extinguished. Penelope found her way back to her room by instinct and fell into bed fully clothed. In the morning she would leave. But when dawn came, or what passed for dawn in a house with blackout curtains, Penelope woke to find a breakfast tray on her desk. Fresh fruit, pastries that smelled like heaven, and a note in elegant script. "I hope you found some peace. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. The library is on the 2nd floor if you enjoy reading." Penelope picked up a strawberry, bit into it, and tasted summer. She shouldn't stay. She knew what this place was now, knew who Vladimarus and his people must be. The evidence was everywhere, from their pale beauty to their nocturnal habits to the way they moved like predators, vampires. She was staying in a house full of vampires. The smart thing would be to leave immediately. Instead, Penelope found herself wandering to the library after breakfast. It was a cathedral of books, 3 stories tall with a spiral staircase connecting the levels. Volumes in dozens of languages lined the shelves, some so old they looked like they might crumble at a touch. Penelope ran her fingers along the spines, marveling at titles in Latin, Greek, languages she couldn't begin to identify. "Do you read?" Vladimarus's voice came from above her. She looked up to find him on the second level, a book in his hands. In the filtered light through the curtained windows, he looked even more otherworldly than before. "Yes," Penelope called back. "Mostly contemporary fiction, nothing like this. Contemporary fiction has its place. But these hold the accumulated knowledge of millennia." He descended the spiral stairs with inhuman grace. "What draws you, history, philosophy, Gothic romance?" Despite herself, Penelope laughed. "Gothic romance seems appropriate, given the circumstances, does it?" Vladimarus handed her the book he'd been holding. It was a collection of Victorian poetry. "I thought you'd have run screaming by now, once you realized what we are." "I probably should have." Penelope opened the book, careful with the delicate pages. "But I'm too tired to run, and you haven't hurt me. And honestly, after the year I've had, vampires seem almost normal." "I doubt that very much." But he looked pleased. "You're not afraid?" "I'm terrified," Penelope admitted. "But I'm also curious, I guess. I thought monsters were supposed to be obvious, cruel and violent and evil. You offered me sanctuary and let me cry in your chapel for hours. We're not all monsters." Vladimarus took the book back, his fingers brushing hers. His skin was cool, not cold. "Though we are dangerous, you should remember that." "Are you dangerous to me specifically?" "That depends." His crimson eyes held hers. "Are you planning to stake me through the heart?" "I don't have a stake. I barely have a working car." "Then perhaps we can coexist peacefully for a time." He shelved the poetry and selected another volume, this one bound in green leather. "This is less dramatic. A collection of botanical illustrations from the 17th century. Beautiful without being deadly." Penelope took it, flipped through pages of exquisitely rendered flowers and herbs. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Vladimarus was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "Because you walked into my home seeking God and found the damned instead, and you stayed anyway. That intrigues me. I'm not that interesting. You don't see yourself clearly." He gestured to a reading nook by the window, where velvet chairs faced each other across a small table. "Stay, read. If you're going to be here, you might as well enjoy it." So Penelope stayed. She curled up in one of the chairs with the botanical illustrations while Vladimarus returned to the second level, pulling books seemingly at random and making notes in a leather journal. Occasionally he would read passages aloud, translating from languages she didn't speak. His voice was hypnotic, rich and cultured, with an accent she couldn't place. Hours passed like minutes. Seraphine brought lunch, setting it down without comment. Penelope ate while reading about plants that had been extinct for centuries, and tried not to think about how surreal her life had become. "Tell me about your loss," Vladimarus said suddenly. Penelope looked up. He was descending the stairs again, his journal tucked under one arm. "Why? Because grief is a language I speak fluently." He settled into the chair across from hers. "You don't have to, of course, but sometimes it helps to share the burden with someone who won't offer empty platitudes." Penelope closed the botanical book. "My parents died 6 months ago, car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light." The words came easier than expected. "We were close. I was an only child. They were my whole family. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back." She took a shaky breath. "And then a month ago I found out my fiancé had been stealing from the charity I ran. A charity that helped kids with cancer. He'd been siphoning money for almost 2 years, and when I confronted him, he acted like I was the problem for making a fuss. The charity's shutting down. My reputation is destroyed because I should have caught it sooner, and I couldn't stay there anymore. So I got in my car and drove until I found your gates." Vladimarus leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "And you thought a convent would fix this?" "I thought God might have answers, since I don't." Penelope laughed bitterly. "Stupid, right? I haven't been to church in years, but when everything falls apart, where else do you go?" "Not stupid, human." He said it like a compliment. "We spend our immortality seeking meaning. At least you're honest about your searching. How long have you been a vampire?" "I was turned in 1523. I've been the vampire king of the Eastern Americas for the last 3 centuries." He said it casually, like he was mentioning he worked in accounting. "Before that, I was human. A duke's second son with no prospects and too much ambition. I sought immortality and found it. Whether that was wisdom or folly, I'm still deciding." Penelope tried to wrap her mind around 500 years of existence. "Do you regret it?" "Some days. Others, I revel in it." His smile was sharp. "Today I'm grateful for it because it means I was here when you needed sanctuary. You don't even know me. I know enough." You're grieving but not broken, angry but not bitter, seeking answers but willing to sit with questions. Vladimarus stood, extending a hand to her. Come, I want to show you something. Penelope took his hand without thinking. His grip was firm, cool, utterly secure. He led her through the mansion, downstairs that descended deeper than should have been possible. The walls changed from plaster to stone, the air growing cooler, and carrying a scent like rich earth. They emerged into a vast underground garden. Penelope gasped. Trees grew here, impossible trees that should have needed sunlight, but thrived in the glow of thousands of bioluminescent plants. A stream burbled over smooth stones, feeding into pools where white koi swam lazy circles. Flowers bloomed in riots of color, and the air hummed with life. This is my sanctuary, Vladimarus said quietly. I built it over decades. When the weight of eternity grows too heavy, I come here and remember that beautiful things can exist even in darkness. Penelope walked to the stream, knelt, and trailed her fingers through water that sparkled like it held stars. It's incredible. I'm trusting you with this. Very few know it exists. He moved to stand beside her. I want you to know that you're safe here, Penelope. Whatever you're running from, whatever you're searching for, you can take the time you need to find it. Why? She looked up at him, this impossible creature who'd shown her nothing but kindness. Why do you care? Vladimarus knelt beside her, and in the soft glow of the garden his face was almost human, almost vulnerable. Because 500 years ago I was fleeing my own demons. I sought refuge and found only people who wanted to use me. I swore then that if I ever had power I would offer true sanctuary to those who needed it. So this house is exactly what you thought it was, just not in the way you expected. Tears slipped down Penelope's cheeks. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where to go from here. Then don't go anywhere, stay. He brushed a tear from her face with his thumb, the gesture achingly gentle. I'm asking you to stay. Penelope Walsh, not as my prisoner, not out of obligation, but because I haven't felt this alive in centuries, and I think perhaps you might find some healing here. You barely know me, she whispered. I know enough to want to know more. The garden seemed to hold its breath. Penelope should have been frightened, should have been running. But all she felt was a strange sense of rightness, as if she'd been driving toward this moment her entire life. Okay, she said. I'll stay for a while. Vladimir smiled, and it transformed his face from beautiful to radiant. Good, then let me show you the rest of my world. The days that followed took on a dreamlike quality. Penelope woke each evening as the sun set, finding Vladimarus waiting to share the night with her. He showed her the vast library's hidden sections, rooms full of magical texts and grimoires written in blood. He introduced her to other members of his court, vampires who'd lived for centuries and had stories that made her head spin. There was Lucien, turned during the French Revolution, who spoke of guillotines and terror with the casual air of someone recounting a dinner party. Isolde, a Viking warrior who'd been turned in the 9th century and still wore her battle scars with pride. Corvus, who'd been a priest before his turning and now served as Vladimarus's closest advisor. They were dangerous, yes, predatory and alien in ways that sometimes made Penelope's instincts scream. But they were also funny, thoughtful, and surprisingly kind to the mortal girl their king had taken under his protection. He's never done this before, Seraphine told her one evening as they walked through the gardens. Vladimarus has allowed humans to visit, even to stay for a time. But he's never invited someone to truly know him. You're special. I'm nothing special, Penelope protested. I'm just someone who took a wrong turn. You walked into a vampire's den thinking it was a convent, and when you learned the truth, you stayed. That takes either great courage or great foolishness. Seraphine's smile was knowing. I think it's the former. Penelope didn't know what to say to that. She was starting to realize that her initial plan to stay just a few days had stretched into a week, then 2. She'd stopped checking her phone, stopped thinking about the world beyond the estate's gates. Here she felt safe. Here, surrounded by immortal predators, she felt more human than she had in months. And Vladimarus, she didn't know what to think about Vladimarus. He sought her out every evening, always with some new wonder to show her. A music room where he played piano compositions he'd written centuries ago. An armory filled with weapons from every age. A rooftop observatory where they watched the stars, and he told her about the night sky as it had looked 500 years ago. They talked about everything. Her childhood, his mortal life, her dreams of making a difference in the world, his burden of ruling a people who existed in the shadows. He listened like her words were precious, remembered details she'd mentioned in passing, and made her feel seen in a way she never had before. Tell me about the charity, he said one night as they sat in the underground garden, which had become their favorite meeting place. Penelope pulled her knees to her chest. It was called Hope's Light. We provided financial assistance to families dealing with childhood cancer, medical bills, housing if they had to relocate for treatment, grief counseling. It wasn't huge, but we helped over 100 families in 5 years. And your fiancé destroyed it, Trevor. The name tasted bitter, yeah. He was the financial officer. I trusted him completely. Turns out he'd been creating fake vendors and funneling money to offshore accounts. The board found out during an audit. By the time I knew what was happening, it was too late to save the charity. The scandal destroyed our funding. Vladimarus was quiet for a moment. What was his name, his full name? Why? Because I'd like to have a conversation with him about the consequences of betrayal. Penelope laughed despite herself. You can't just terrorize my ex-fiancé, can I? I'm the Vampire King. Terrorizing is in the job description. But his tone was light. I won't, of course. Not without your permission. But I could ensure he faces justice of a more creative variety than human courts might provide. Tempting, but I think I just want to forget he exists. Penelope plucked a bioluminescent flower and twirled it between her fingers. I keep thinking about the families, though, the ones we could have helped if he hadn't stolen from them. That's what really kills me. Not the betrayal, but the ripple effects. The suffering that could have been prevented. You have a good heart. Vladimarus moved closer, until their shoulders touched. Too good for the world you came from. The world you came from too, once. True. But I've had 5 centuries to develop a more cynical perspective. He took the flower from her fingers and tucked it behind her ear. You make me remember what it was like to hope, to believe that goodness matters. Of course goodness matters, does it? I've lived through wars, plagues, genocides. I've seen humanity's capacity for cruelty up close, and yet here you are, mourning not your own pain but the suffering of strangers you could have helped. His fingers lingered against her cheek. You're extraordinary, Penelope Walsh. Her heart raced at his touch. I'm really not. Let me be the judge of that. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay. Are you afraid of me? Penelope considered the question carefully. Sometimes, when I remember what you are, what you could do. But mostly, no. I feel safer with you than I have with anyone in a long time, even knowing I drink blood to survive, that I could kill you without effort. Even knowing that. She met his crimson eyes. You've had 100 opportunities to hurt me and chosen kindness every time. That means something. Vladimarus leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he pressed his lips to her forehead, a chaste kiss that somehow felt more intimate than anything she'd experienced. You're dangerous to me too, you know. How could I possibly be dangerous to you? Because you make me want things I shouldn't, feel things I thought I'd buried with my mortality. He pulled back and she could see conflict in his expression. I'm growing attached to you. That's complicated. Why? Because you're human, fragile and temporary. Because I'm a monster no matter how I dress it up. Because wanting you, caring for you, is selfish when I have nothing to offer but darkness. Penelope's chest tightened. What if I don't mind the darkness? You should. You deserve sunlight and normalcy and a life that doesn't involve hiding from the day. Maybe I'm tired of sunlight. Maybe normal got me nothing but heartbreak. She took his hand, laced her fingers through his. You keep telling me what I deserve. What if I want to decide that for myself? Penelope, I'm not saying I have this figured out. I don't. Everything about this is insane. But I'm happy here, happier than I've been in months. And if that's wrong or foolish, I don't care. Vladimarus closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were filled with something that looked like wonder. You truly mean that? I do, then stay. Not as a guest, not as someone passing through. Stay with me, truly. Let me court you properly, the way I would have 5 centuries ago if I'd met you then. Court me? Penelope couldn't help but smile. That's very old-fashioned. I'm a very old-fashioned creature. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles with exquisite gentleness. Say yes. Let me show you what it means to be cherished by someone who has eternity to devote to it. Every logical part of Penelope's brain screamed that this was crazy. She'd known him for 2 weeks. He was a vampire. This couldn't possibly end well, but her heart, battered and bruised as it was, recognized something true in his words. Something worth taking a risk for. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll stay. The smile that lit Vladimarus's face was glorious. He pulled her close, wrapping her in his arms, and Penelope felt something in her chest that had been frozen for months finally begin to thaw. The courting that followed was unlike anything Penelope had imagined. Vladimarus was attentive without being smothering, romantic without being cloying. He brought her gifts, small, thoughtful things that showed he listened when she spoke. A first edition of her favorite novel, seeds for flowers she'd mentioned loving as a child, to plant in his underground garden. A locket containing a photograph of her parents she'd thought lost in the move. How did you get this? She asked, tears streaming down her face as she studied her parents' smiling faces. I have resources, Vladimarus said simply. I made some calls. A friend in your old city found it in storage. This is too much. It's not nearly enough. He fastened the locket around her neck. I want to give you the world, Penelope, or at least the parts of it that matter to you. They spent hours in the library. Vladimarus reading to her from books in languages she didn't speak, translating poetry and philosophy and love letters from ages past. They walked through his gardens, both above and below ground, and he taught her the names of plants that existed nowhere else on earth. He played piano for her, compositions that made her weep with their beauty. And slowly, carefully, they learned each other's boundaries. Vladimarus was always conscious of his strength, his predatory nature. He touched her like she was made of spun glass, asking permission before every kiss, every embrace. Penelope found herself initiating more of their contact, proving to him that she wasn't afraid. I won't break, she told him one evening as they danced in the empty ballroom, swaying to music only he could hear. I know, but I've broken so many things over the centuries. I'd rather be too careful with you than not careful enough. I trust you. You shouldn't. But he held her closer anyway, his face buried in her hair. You should run from me, Penelope. I'm a killer, a predator. I've done terrible things. We've all done terrible things. You've just had longer to accumulate them. She pulled back to look at him. Tell me the worst thing you've ever done. Vladimarus flinched. Why would you want to know that? Because if we're doing this, really doing this, I need to know all of you. Not just the romantic gentleman who gives me flowers. I need to know the monster too. He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in 1647, I executed my own brother. He was human, much older than I was when I was turned. He discovered what I'd become and tried to destroy me. Tried to rally the village to burn my estate with everyone I'd given sanctuary to inside. I could have stopped him without killing him. I had the power. But I was angry, and he was a threat, and I didn't want to show mercy. His voice cracked. So I tore out his throat and left his body on the steps of the church he'd tried to weaponize against me. Penelope absorbed this, tried to reconcile the violence with the gentle man holding her. Do you regret it? Every day for the last 4 centuries. Good. She cupped his face in her hands. Not because I'm glad you suffer, but because it means you're not the monster you think you are. Monsters don't regret. They don't agonize over choices made centuries ago. Penelope, I'm not saying it was right. It wasn't. But you were scared and angry and you made a terrible choice. You're allowed to have done that and still be worthy of love. Vladimarus pulled her tight against him and she felt him shudder. How are you real? How did you walk into my life and see past every wall I've built? Maybe I'm just stubborn. She kissed his jaw, his cheek, the corner of his mouth. Or maybe we're both exactly what the other needs right now. He captured her lips with his, and the kiss was different from the chaste touches they'd shared before. It was hungry, desperate, full of centuries of loneliness meeting months of grief and transforming into something new. Something that tasted like hope. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vladimarus rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling in love with you. I need you to know that. This isn't just attraction or fascination. I'm falling in love with you and it terrifies me. Why does it terrify you? Because you're mortal. Because loving you means watching you age and die while I remain unchanged. Because I don't know how to be what you need. Penelope's heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. What if we didn't think about the future? What if we just focused on now? I've lived too long to ignore the future. Then we'll figure it out together. She kissed him again, softer this time. I'm falling in love with you too, Vladimarus. And yes, it's terrifying and probably stupid and definitely complicated. But I don't want to run from it. I want to see where it goes. You're brave, so much braver than I am. I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being afraid. They held each other in the empty ballroom as the night deepened around them, 2 broken creatures finding unexpected wholeness in each other's arms. The next few weeks were the happiest Penelope could remember. She and Vladimarus grew closer, their relationship deepening from attraction to something profound. She met more of his world, learned the politics of the vampire courts, understood the delicate balance he maintained as king. It wasn't all perfect. There were moments when his nature frightened her, like when she stumbled upon him feeding from a willing donor, or when his eyes flashed red with hunger. There were nights when she woke alone, unable to join him in the sunlight hours, feeling the weight of their differences. But there were also moments of perfect joy, dancing under the stars on his rooftop, reading poetry to each other in the library, working side by side in the underground garden, planting flowers that would outlive them both. Corvus pulled her aside one evening, his ancient eyes kind. He's different with you, lighter. I haven't seen him this way in all the centuries I've known him. Is that a good thing? Penelope asked. It's a necessary thing. Vladimarus carries the weight of his people, the burden of immortality, the guilt of his past. You help him remember joy. That's a gift beyond measure. But there were tensions in the court that Penelope didn't fully understand. Whispers and sideways glances when she passed. Isolde warned her that not everyone was pleased with her presence. Some of the older vampires think humans should be food or thralls. Nothing more, the Viking warrior said bluntly. They don't like seeing their king besotted with a mortal. Should I be worried? Not while Vladimarus draws breath. He'd destroy anyone who threatened you. Isolde's smile was sharp. But be careful. Court politics are vicious and you're an easy target. The warning proved prophetic. Penelope was in the library one evening, waiting for Vladimarus to return from a council meeting, when a vampire she didn't recognize appeared. He was beautiful in the way they all were, with white hair cropped short and eyes like frozen amber. So you're the human pet, he said, his accent thick with centuries. I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Penelope stood, every instinct screaming danger. Who are you? Demetrios. I serve on the High Council of the Eastern Americas and I think you're a liability. I don't care what you think, you should. He moved closer, inhumanly fast. Vladimarus is weak because of you. Distracted. Vulnerable. That puts all of us at risk. Then take it up with him. I'm taking it up with you. Demetrios grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. Leave. Tonight. Go back to your pathetic mortal life and let the king focus on what matters. Let her go. Vladimarus's voice cut through the library like a blade. He stood in the doorway and his fury was a palpable thing. His eyes blazed crimson and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Demetrios released Penelope immediately. My king, I was just threatening what's mine. Vladimarus crossed the distance between them in a blur of motion, lifting Demetrios by the throat. You will never touch her again. You will never speak to her again. You will leave my court and not return unless I summon you. Am I understood? You're making a mistake, Demetrios choked out. She'll be your downfall, then I'll fall gladly. Vladimarus threw him across the room. Demetrios hit the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. Get out of my sight. The vampire fled, and Vladimarus turned to Penelope, his expression transforming from rage to concern. Are you hurt? I'm fine, shaken but fine. She rubbed her arm where bruises were already forming. Is he right? Am I making you vulnerable? No. Vladimarus pulled her into his arms. You make me stronger. Anyone who can't see that is a fool. But if your own council thinks I'm a liability, the council serves me, not the other way around. And if they have a problem with you, they can find a new king. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I won't lose you, Penelope. Not to politics, not to fear, not to anything. You might not have a choice. I'm human. I'm temporary, then we change that. Penelope pulled back, her heart racing. What? Turn you, make you like me, give you eternity. His eyes searched hers desperately. It's the only solution, isn't it? The only way we can truly be together. Vladimarus, I can't just, that's a huge decision. I'd be giving up my humanity, my mortality, everything I know. I know it's asking too much, but I'm asking anyway. He took her hands. I love you, Penelope Walsh. I want centuries with you, not decades. I want to show you the world in all its ages. I want to build something with you that lasts forever. Penelope's mind reeled. She'd known this conversation was coming eventually, but she hadn't expected it so soon or so intensely. I need time to think. Of course. Take all the time you need. But she could see the fear in his eyes, the worry that she'd choose mortality over him. That night, Penelope lay awake in her room, staring at the ceiling and wrestling with the impossible choice before her. Become a vampire and spend eternity with the man she loved, giving up sunlight and humanity and everything she'd known. Or remain mortal and watch their relationship with her under the weight of her inevitable aging and death. There was a third option, she realized. She could leave. Go back to her old life, try to rebuild. Forget any of this had happened. But the thought made her chest ache. She didn't want to leave. Didn't want to lose Vladimarus or the strange, beautiful world he'd introduced her to. Seraphine found her in the gardens the next evening, sitting by the fountain. He told you, the vampire said, settling onto the stone bench beside Penelope. About turning me? Yeah, and you're conflicted at. Wouldn't you be? Penelope threw a coin into the fountain, watched it sink. He's asking me to give up my entire existence, my humanity, the possibility of heaven or whatever comes after death. That's not a small thing. No, it's not. Seraphine was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you my story? Please, I was turned in 1893. I was dying of tuberculosis, wasting away in a charity hospital. Vladimarus found me there, visiting the sick because he remembered what it was like to be mortal and suffering. He offered me a choice, die within the week or live forever as a vampire. Seraphine smiled at the memory. I chose life, and I've never regretted it. I've seen wonders, experienced joys I never could have imagined. But I also gave up things, the possibility of children, watching sunrises, growing old with a mortal partner. Do you miss those things? Sometimes. But I gained so much more than I lost. Seraphine took Penelope's hand. The question isn't whether you'll lose things by turning. You will. The question is whether what you gain is worth it. What if I'm not strong enough for this life? You walked into a house of vampires thinking it was a convent and didn't run when you learned the truth. You stood up to Demetrios. You saw Vladimarus at his worst and loved him anyway. Seraphine squeezed her hand. You're stronger than you know. Penelope thought about that conversation for days. She prayed in the chapel, asking for guidance from a god she wasn't sure listened anymore. She walked the gardens and imagined living in them for centuries instead of months. She watched Vladimarus, studied the way he moved through his immortal existence with grace and purpose. Finally, she made her decision. She found him in the music room, playing a melancholy piece she didn't recognize. He stopped when he saw her, his expression guarded. I have an answer, Penelope said. I'm listening. I'll turn, but not yet. She moved to stand beside the piano. I need time to settle my mortal affairs first, to say goodbye to the life I had, even if it was broken. And I need to be absolutely sure this is what I want. Not just something I'm doing because I'm afraid of losing you. Relief and disappointment warred on his face. How much time? 6 months. Let me live as a mortal for 6 more months. Let me experience one more spring and summer in the sun. And then if I still feel the same way, I'll turn. Vladimarus stood, crossed to her, and pulled her into his arms. 6 months, I can give you that, though every day will feel like an eternity. Good thing you're used to eternity. He laughed, the sound breaking the tension. I love you, whatever you decide, I love you. I love you too. That's why I need to be sure. The next 6 months were both beautiful and bittersweet. Penelope spent her days in the sun, soaking up warmth she'd soon have to abandon. She reconnected with a few old friends, made vague excuses about where she'd been and what she was planning. She settled her parents' estate, donated what she could to charities that reminded her of hope's light. And every evening she returned to Vladimarus's estate, to his arms, to the life she was choosing. They talked about what turning would mean. The pain of transformation, the hunger that would follow, the learning curve of controlling her new nature. Vladimarus was honest about the difficulties, refused to romanticize the process. It will hurt, he told her. My venom will feel like fire in your veins. You'll die, in a sense. Your heart will stop, your mortal body will fail, and then you'll wake up as something new. Will I be different? Will I still be me? You'll be yourself, enhanced. Stronger, faster, sharper. Your emotions will be more intense. But your soul, your essential self, remains. And the hunger, we'll manage it together. I'll teach you control. Seraphine and the others will help. He cupped her face. You won't be alone in this. Penelope nodded, trying to imagine existing on blood instead of food, sleeping through daylight hours, watching the world change around her for centuries. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. As her self-imposed deadline approached, Penelope found herself growing more certain. She didn't want to lose Vladimarus, didn't want to give up the community she'd found among his court, didn't want to return to a mortal world that had given her nothing but pain. Here, in the darkness, she'd found light. The night before her turning, Vladimarus took her to the rooftop observatory one last time. Last chance to change your mind, he said softly. I'll love you no matter what you choose. Penelope looked up at the stars, the same stars humans had been watching since the dawn of time. Soon she'd have centuries to study them, to learn their patterns and changes, to exist in their timeless dance. I'm ready, she said. Turn me, make me yours forever. Vladimarus kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of promise. Forever, he murmured against her lips. I'm going to hold you to that. They went to his chambers, a room Penelope had never entered before. It was opulent but not ostentatious, with heavy curtains blocking any hint of daylight and furniture that had clearly been collected over centuries. Lie down, Vladimarus said. Gesturing to the massive bed, Penelope did, her heart racing. This was it. The point of no return. Vladimarus knelt beside her, brushing hair from her neck. I'll make it as quick as I can. The pain will be intense, but it fades. And when you wake, I'll be here. I trust you. He kissed her one more time, gentle and reverent. Then his lips moved to her throat and she felt the scrape of fangs against her skin. I love you, he whispered. Then he bit down. Pain exploded through Penelope's body, white hot and all-consuming. She screamed, couldn't help it, as venom flooded her veins like liquid fire. Vladimarus held her down gently but firmly as she convulsed, as her body fought the transformation. It felt like dying. Maybe it was dying. Her vision went dark, her heart stuttering in her chest. The last thing she heard was Vladimarus's voice, soft and soothing, telling her everything would be all right. Then nothing. Penelope woke to a world transformed. Every color was sharper, every sound clearer. She could hear heartbeats in the rooms below, smell blood pumping through distant veins. Her body felt strong, powerful, like she could move mountains. And she was so hungry. Vladimarus was there immediately, pressing a glass to her lips. Drink, it will help. Blood, she was drinking blood. The thought should have disgusted her, but instead it was the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted. Rich and warm and perfect. She drained the glass, then another, until the gnawing hunger faded to manageable levels. How do you feel? Vladimarus asked. Penelope looked at her hands, watched as her fingers moved with inhuman speed. Different, strong, alive, which is ironic. She met his eyes, seeing them clearly for the first time in her new vampire vision. Did it work? You're beautiful. Perfect, vampire. He pulled her into his arms. Welcome to forever, my love. Penelope laughed, giddy with the rush of transformation. Forever. That's a long time. We'll fill it with wonders, I promise you that. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustment. Penelope learned to control her new strength, her speed, her hunger. Seraphine taught her how to feed without killing, how to find willing donors or procure blood through the channels vampires had established over centuries. She mourned the loss of sunlight, the taste of regular food, the simple humanity she'd taken for granted. But she also reveled in her new abilities. She could read books in hours instead of days, speak languages she absorbed in weeks, move through the world like a shadow. And she had Vladimarus beside her through all of it, patient and loving and utterly devoted. The court accepted her more readily as a vampire. Demetrios even returned, offering a stiff apology that Penelope graciously accepted. She understood now that she'd been a liability when she was mortal. But as an immortal, as Vladimarus's partner in truth, she had a place here. She took on responsibilities in the court, using her mortal experience with charity work to establish programs that helped vampires integrate with human society. She mediated disputes, offered counsel, and slowly became someone the other vampires respected. But her favorite times were still the quiet moments with Vladimarus, dancing in empty ballrooms, reading in the library, working in the underground garden that had become their sanctuary. One evening, a year after her turning, they were planting new flowers when Vladimarus said, "I want to show you something." He led her deeper into the garden, to a section she hadn't explored before. There, carved into the stone wall, were names. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, in various scripts and languages. "What is this?" Penelope asked. "Everyone I've given sanctuary to over the centuries. Humans who needed refuge, vampires who needed a home. I carved their names here so they're not forgotten." He pulled out a knife, began carving fresh letters into the stone. Penelope Walsh, who mistook my home for a convent and stayed when she learned the truth. Who brought light to my darkness and taught me to hope again. Tears, blood tears now slipped down Penelope's cheeks. "You don't have to. I want to. I want to remember this. Remember you. Remember the day my eternity became worth living." She kissed him then, deep and passionate and full of all the love she couldn't put into words. When they broke apart, she took the knife from his hand and carved her own edition. Vladimarus Ashford, who offered sanctuary when I needed it most, who showed me that monsters can be more human than humans, who gave me forever and made me want to live it. They stood together in their garden, surrounded by names and memories and growing things. And Penelope felt something she hadn't felt since before her parents died, to clean peace. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For letting me pray that first night, for asking me to stay, for giving me a reason to choose forever." Vladimir smiled, radiant and real. "Thank you for walking through my gates, for seeing past what I am to who I am, for choosing me, choosing this, when you could have chosen safety. This is safety. You're my safety." They held each other as the bioluminescent plants glowed brighter, as the underground stream sang its eternal song, as the weight of forever settled comfortable around their shoulders. Penelope had sought sanctuary in a convent and found it in a vampire's arms instead. She'd prayed for answers and received them in the most unexpected way. She'd lost everything that had defined her mortal life and gained an immortal existence she never could have imagined. And she wouldn't change a single moment of it. Years passed, then decades. Penelope and Vladimarus ruled the Eastern Americas together, a partnership built on love and trust and mutual respect. They traveled the world, saw empires rise and fall, watched humanity stumble toward whatever future awaited it. They established safe houses for vampires across the continent. They created programs to help newly turned vampires adjust. They mediated conflicts and prevented wars and slowly, carefully built bridges between vampire and human societies. It wasn't always easy. There were challenges, conflicts, moments when Penelope missed her mortality, But Vladimarus was always there, steady and loving and completely hers. And when the weight of eternity grew heavy, they would retreat to their underground garden and remember. Remember the night a grieving human woman drove through iron gates seeking God and found something better, found love, found purpose, found home. Penelope would trace the names carved in stone, her own and Vladimarus's among hundreds of others, and feel grateful beyond measure. Grateful for wrong turns that became right ones. Grateful for vampires who offered sanctuary. Grateful for a love that transcended mortality and time. She had mistaken a vampire king's estate for a convent. He had let her pray, then asked her to stay. And in staying, in choosing darkness over light and forever over mortality, Penelope had found exactly what she'd been searching for all along. Not answers from God, but a reason to live fully. Not escape from pain, but the strength to transform it into something beautiful. Not an ending, but a beginning that would last for all the centuries to come. In Vladimarus's arms, in their garden, in the life they'd built together, Penelope was finally, completely, eternally home. And that was worth everything she'd given up to get there.